Fractured Lies, Daughter of Sea and Sky, Book 3, written by AR Colbert, narrated by Jennifer Groberg. Part 2. The Water Princess. Chapter 15. The situation wasn't funny at all, but I couldn't help but laugh. Sean, a broad-shouldered, muscular hulk of a man, hunched over at the counter, whining over a mixing bowl. Giant flower handprints were smeared across his apron, and he pouted at my Aunt Millie. "I don't know what I'm doing wrong. They keep breaking." "They're eggs, Sean. They're supposed to break." I peered into his bowl at the puddle of broken yolks and pulverized shells. "Maybe you should try a more delicate touch." We tried to keep our conversation light and fluffy, in the hopes it would make Driscoll and Devon a little less sour. Devon still had his undies in a wad about losing his previous life to these people, and Old Man Driscoll wanted to be anywhere else. But at least we were all alive now. Rossel couldn't get us here, and as soon as we helped Millie with her chore, we would have clean beds to sleep in before our trip to Atlantis tomorrow. Done! I stepped back from my own mixing bowl, proudly examining the batter within. "Do you want me to pour it into the baking dish?" "Not yet." Millie's shoulders sagged. "We're missing the final ingredient." She dragged her feet over to a narrow cabinet with steel bars running across the front of it. With the click of the lock, the door swung open to reveal a pharmaceutical smorgasbord. "Oh!" I put the heel of my hand against my forehead. "Of course! This is all making much better sense now. You're making some kind of healing products, aren't you? I was wondering why they would put you in charge of restocking their baked goods." I licked some raw brownie batter off of my thumb and gave an approving nod. "No offense, of course. This is actually really good. You're just not exactly known for your baking skills." "I am around here," Millie sighed, and walked over to me with the medicine bottle in her hand. She twisted off the lid, and I sneaked a quick peek inside. A silvery, greenish substance swirled at the bottom like liquid metal. "What is that?" "It's concentrated soma, and it's incredibly illegal." "And you're putting it in the brownies?" Millie frowned. "It takes a special touch to, enhance these baked goods without going overboard. They need a healer to do it. This is how we pay for our accommodations." "They want to feel good without losing their minds." Driscoll waved an angry hand from the corner of the room and began grumbling something about how the whole lot of them were a bunch of druggies. Millie didn't disagree. "So you're making special brownies?" I laughed. My little rule-following aunt had a rebellious streak in her after all. Seems fitting for an island of supernatural misfits. "They are criminals," Driscoll bellowed. "Soma is like 10 times stronger than ambrosia," Sean said. "It was too strong to remain on Earth. It's only grown in Olympus now, which makes me wonder how they have a store of it here." He shot a disapproving look in Millie's direction. "There are always outside groups looking to hire keepers for their less than admirable jobs, but money has little value here, so they find other methods of keeping everyone happy." Millie cut sad eyes over to Devon, who sat stone-faced beside Driscoll. When he didn't respond, she set the bottle of soma on the counter and joined him on the bench. "When you were here before, in your past life, we worked together on some of these missions." Millie took Devon's hand in hers. Though she looked at him while she spoke, I suspected this explanation was just as much for the rest of us as it was for him. "There was an active group of evil, powerful beings whose only goal was to destroy the Keepers and everything we stood for." "The Manticorians," I whispered. "Yes." Millie's expression hardened as her eyes rested on me for a moment. Thankfully, she didn't know how I knew about the Manticorians. It would be difficult to explain that I gathered all of my information from a textbook given to me by the leader of that group, Rasputin himself. We did everything we could to stop them, but some of the jobs we were tasked with required tactics that weren't exactly above board. Millie dropped her chin, lost in a memory. So we took sanctuary here, where we could be safe in between missions. We made friends with like-minded soldiers, others who were dedicated to the cause. Tano was one of our best and brightest men. You two were like brothers, she said to Devon. He visibly stiffened, but still made no response. But someone got to him. Tano turned on us in St. Petersburg. He struck a deal with someone up high in the Atlantean Council, someone within our very own ranks who was working for the Manticorians. He knew we were close to eliminating them, and the councilman offered to exonerate Tano for all of his previous crimes if he killed us. So he agreed? Millie nodded. We trusted Tano. We never saw it coming. I escaped. She touched Devon's cheek. But you weren't so lucky. To Tano's credit, he knew he'd made a mistake. He took out 4 of our own men, which was enough to erase his criminal history per the deal he'd struck with the council. But then he turned on Rasputin as well. Tano became a free agent. So how did he end up back here again? I asked. Tano needs boundaries. Freedom doesn't work out too well for him. When left to his own devices, he makes poor decisions. One list of crimes was replaced by another, and here he is again. What happened to you? Devon asked. His eyes were glossy, focused intently on my aunt. I served my sentence for 100 years, and I've been playing by the law ever since. With one final squeeze of Devon's hand, Millie stood and returned to work. But that's enough talk about the past. We have more important things to focus on, like the future. She measured out the soma, pouring exactly 6 drops into the batter and mixing it in before transferring it to the baking dish. She turned the conversation toward me as she worked. When you go to Atlantis tomorrow, you'll need to act as though you are a guardian. It's the most common power among Atlanteans, and they will not ask you to prove anything. If they do, run as fast as you can, and we'll just say you're not particularly adept. I nodded. Got it. But as for your real powers... She put the brownies in the oven and turned to me. The whole room drew a collective breath, everyone wondering the same thing. Did you really stop time back in my study? I did. I busied myself with cleaning up the mess I'd made on the countertop, trying to avoid making eye contact with anyone. Is it something you can replicate? Nope. Are you sure? Have you tried it again? Maybe under different circumstances? I could help. We could try to... Millie, I can't. I threw a hand towel onto the counter, sending a cloud of cocoa powder into the air. I've tried. It's actually really frustrating, and apparently no one has ever heard of a power like this. I'm tired of being the weird one. I'd rather just drop it altogether. There's nothing you can do. I'm sorry, Everly. I didn't mean to upset you. You didn't. I'm just tired. It's been a long day. Of course, and I'm sure that must have taken a lot out of you. Why don't you go get some rest? We're almost finished here, and I can wrap things up on my own. Let's find you a room and some supper. You've got an even bigger day ahead of you tomorrow. She was right, and that big day ahead of me was exactly what had me so tense. Though I didn't know what scared me more, the thought of going into Atlantis, or the fear of what might happen if we really did find the missing piece of the prophecy. There was no backing out now. Chapter 16. Tano didn't come around again. Some other man showed us to comfortable rooms within the rock of Port Anastasia. As we ventured through the hallways, I realized the secret hideout was not only hidden within the stony cliffs of the island, but it extended well below the shore, down under the water as well. Small windows punctuating the hull revealed sea life in the clear water outside of the building. We all shared one room. Sean and I split a bunk bed, Driscoll slept on the couch, and Millie and Devon shared the queen-sized bed in the corner. I tried really hard not to let myself think too much about my aunt and Devon. It still weirded me out if I let it. We were all exhausted and slept like the dead right up until the sound of someone knocking at our door brought us back to life the next morning. "Coming!" Millie called out as her feet swung down to the floor. I sat up and rubbed my eyes, only to find Millie gaping at me when I dropped my hands. "What is it?" "Your aura. It's white again," she whispered. The knock sounded once more, louder this time. "1 minute!" Millie's sweet voice was like a song to the stranger on the opposite side of the door, but she practically growled at me as she flew across the room and tossed my covers over my head. "Get under there! Don't move! Don't even breathe! We can't let them see you!" I held my breath as the door eased open and Millie said hello. A man's voice responded, "Tano." Shoot! If only it could have been anyone else. Was it even possible to hide an aura through a blanket, or would it radiate out, unconstrained by fabric and pillows? "Breakfast is ready. Georgette took one look at that tray full of goodies you left in the kitchen and insisted we feed you before we kick you out. There's a stack of pancakes 3 feet tall in there." His laugh was deep and hollow. "Great, thank you. We'll be right down." I heard a hand smack against the door, and Tano's voice grew louder and closer. "Wait, did everyone sleep okay last night?" "Just fine." Millie's voice was higher, on the verge of panic. Tano's wheezy breathing came even closer, audible through the blanket. He had to have been right over me. "Aren't you missing someone?" "She's in the bathroom," Driscoll shouted. "And thee better hurry up or I might wet myself." He banged on the wall as he yelled. Tano grunted a sound of disgust, and I loosed a silent breath as his heavy footfalls left my side. "All right, we'll see you in the dining room." It was a full 30 seconds after the door closed before Sean yanked the blanket off of me. "That was too close. We've got to get you more of your pills." "You didn't happen to bring them with you, did you?" I looked hopefully at Millie. "I didn't, and I don't think I can make any more without Thaddeus, or another Agarthian with strong glamour. Do you think you might be able to take Sean and Everly back to retrieve them real quick?" she asked Devon. "Sounds like we probably better. But can I grab some pancakes first?" "No," Sean and Millie answered in unison. "Fine," Devon grumbled. "Come on." He extended 2 hands to his sides. Sean and I approached, and Devon frowned at our attire. Sean was barefoot in athletic shorts and a wholly stained T-shirt with the sleeves cut off. I was wearing a faded old nightshirt with a cartoon bird on the front that hung down to my knees. It wasn't unusual for guests to arrive at Port Anastasia with nothing but the clothes on their backs, but unfortunately, the selection of extra clothing they had to change into was pretty limited. "Don't look at me like that," I muttered. "We'll get some other clothes at Millie's house before we come back." "That's a good idea, for all of our sakes." He wrinkled his nose. I moved to elbow him in the ribs, but we were gone before I could. I was dipped into the frigid sensation of teleporting across a fabric of reality, but only for a moment before I found myself standing on a pile of papers on the floor of Millie's study. The room had been ravaged from our magical flight the day before, but the Olympians were gone. I dropped the boys' hands and spun in a circle, surveying the damage. "This place is a wreck," Sean said. "No kidding. I can't believe Jeeves hasn't... Oh my goodness, I forgot about Jeeves and Pierre." I turned from the room, taking the stairs 2 at a time and calling out to my aunt's butler and private chef. "Everly, wait!" Sean's voice called out from the study, but he was by my side in a flash, one of the benefits of his powers. "If they're still here, you're going to have a lot of explaining to do." "I don't care. We'll figure that out later. I need to know that the Olympians didn't get to them. We've got to make sure they're okay." I continued calling out their names until we reached the foyer at the bottom of the stairs. The house was silent. Millie's place had never been so quiet. I had to strain my ears to hear the faintest whine and a scratch at the back door. I whipped around to find two enormous drooling faces looking through the glass door from the patio in Millie's courtyard. "Lemon Drop! Tiny Tim!" Sean got to the door before I did, of course, and he let Millie's giant mastiffs inside. They greeted us with slobbery noses mashed into our legs. "Hey, pups, can you help us find Jeeves and Pierre?" They tilted their huge faces to the side, tails wagging, as they looked up at us. "They're not exactly bloodhounds," I said with a shrug to Sean. But we didn't need the dogs to help us find the others. Devon had already stumbled across them in the most obvious of places, their usual hangout, the kitchen. We went running at his call, and I gasped as I took in Jeeves's massive body tied down to a chair with his back facing Pierre. Both men were restrained at the wrists, waists, and ankles, with giant gags in their mouths. They must have been this way overnight. We hurried to pull the gags and remove their bindings as fast as we could. "Everly, what is going on?" Jeeves's voice was hoarse, and it broke my heart to think of them screaming or calling out for help for so many hours. Sean gave me the side eye. He'd warned me about this, and I didn't have an explanation ready. So I would turn the question back around to them instead, at least until I thought up a plan. "You tell me! Who did this to you? And are you hurt?" I turned Jeeves's wrists over in my hands, searching for any injuries before doing the same to Pierre. Pierre wasn't as outwardly appreciative, however. He wrinkled his brow as he examined my bird nightgown. "Yes, we are fine. But the woman and the short man, they were searching for something. She wanted to kill us, but the man said no. I am so thankful for this small little man." Pierre wiped his brow. "I know this is gonna sound crazy." Jeeves ran a hand through his hair and took a deep breath. "But these weren't ordinary people. They—" "Zip it," Pierre warned sternly. Sean and I exchanged looks. They saw the Olympians' powers. We were going to have to do something about that, but at least they weren't interested in talking about it for now. Devon backed toward the door. He was never a fan of confrontation. "I'm gonna head back upstairs to get, you know." "Thanks." I nodded to him. "I'll get myself a glass of water ready." I had to hurry and take the pills before we teleported back to Port Anaris. We didn't have much time before they expected us for breakfast there. "Sean, can you run and see if the tablet is still here? It was in Driscoll's room. I think Tate put some kind of glamour on it, so I'm hoping it's still there." "I'm on it." He took off after Devon, leaving me alone with Millie's help. "Should I call the cops?" Jeeves glanced back and forth between Pierre and me. "No, Jeeves, it's fine. We'll get everything taken care of. But I need you to sit down so I can explain." I pulled out my phone to dial Tate. He needed to get over here as fast as possible to remove their memories of the Keepers. But after 4 rings, I remembered. Tate was gone. He'd gone back down to Agartha. Shoot. I slammed my phone down on the counter. "Are you sure everything is okay, Everly? I really think I should call the cops." "No!" My voice came out louder than I'd intended. "Do not call the cops. I promise I've got everything under control." Jeeves startled and settled onto a bar stool next to Pierre while I typed out a rapid-fire group text to Gayla and Dom, asking them to get an Agarthian siren over here, stat. Sean popped back through the door. "It's here." He patted his back pocket. "But I don't think it would be safe to take it to our final destination." He lifted his brows, hoping I'd understand. I had to agree with his assessment. Taking the tablet into Atlantis didn't sound like a great plan. But we couldn't leave it here either, not with Olympians searching the city for it. "What about Portamaris?" I asked. Sean shrugged. "I guess that might be the safest option for now. Millie will know what to do with it." "You know where Millie is?" Pierre asked. I shushed him and looked back to the doorway in time to see Devon join us again. He tossed me my small bottle of pills, and I quickly swallowed one down, gulping the glass of water I'd prepared. "Oh no, Ev. Please tell me you're not turning to drugs." Jeeves frowned. "They're not drugs. I rubbed my temples. "I just need to think for a second." My phone rang. "Dom." I tossed it to Sean. "Here, you talk. I'm going to go change clothes. I think we need to head straight for Atlantis. I don't want to waste any more time eating pancakes by the sea or making special brownies. I've got a bad feeling. We need to hurry this along." "Hang on." Jeeves held out a hand. "Did you just say—" "Don't worry, Jeeves. You won't remember any of this." I turned back to Devon. "Keep an eye on them for a sec, please. I'll be right back." Then I turned my back on my friends, leaving them to manage the chaos we'd created. It only took 24 hours for our whole world to get flipped on its head. Dom could get someone to help Jeeves and Pierre forget what they saw, but what about the rest of us? I wouldn't forget the insanity gleaming in that Olympian woman's eyes as she tried to throw Sean from the window, or the red face of the man who threw books and furniture at me and my friends. No, they were after something, and they were willing to go to drastic measures to get it. If it was a tablet, that meant the stakes had been raised. Rosso let me keep it for a while, but he obviously wanted it back. I'd started something back at the warehouse, and I was afraid it might be something bigger than I was prepared to handle. We had to get to Atlantis. We had to figure out what the prophecy said before Rosso and his Olympians got their hands on it again. Chapter 17. We waited at Millie's until Dom arrived with some Agarthian girl she'd gone to high school with. I gave them a quick rundown of what had happened the day before, and the girl promised she'd be able to clear Jeeves's and Pierre's memories without any difficulty. I was more than a little nervous watching her work, but she stayed true to her word. Jeeves and Pierre remembered nothing when she finished. She even added a great little story about how I'd brought a kitten into Millie's house, which sent the dogs into a frenzy in her study, tearing up half of Millie's things in an effort to catch the cuddly little thing. After her work was done, the Agarthian girl left, leaving me alone with Dom, Jeeves, and Pierre. I apologized for the mess, assuring them the kitten was gone, then asked them to go to the store to get Millie more of that fancy cheese she liked so much as my apology gift. I bid them a silent goodbye as they left. You'll see them again, I thought to myself. Just don't die in Atlantis. Be safe. Dom squeezed me tight, picking up on my nerves, no doubt. Devon and Sean reappeared as we were mid-hug, each wearing fresh clothes and carrying a small bag. Sean handed me his, a messenger bag holding my pills, the dagger I'd taken from Russell, and a couple of snacks. Devon's bag was from Millie's closet, and I suspected it was packed especially for her. He was such a thoughtful little soulmate. I will, I promised. Am I all blue? I spun so they could examine my aura from all angles. You're blue, she assured me. Great. And who knows, with any luck, the amplifying action of these pills might just come in handy when we're in Atlantis. Maybe so. Dom smiled and gave my hand a little squeeze before turning to Sean. Don't let anything happen to her down there. I won't. About that, Devon said. How would you feel about going straight to Atlantis from here? Right now? I asked. He nodded. It took a little more out of me than I expected to get us here and then to Sean's apartment for fresh clothes. I'm not sure if we go back to Portamaris that I'll have the strength to get you into Atlantis this morning, too. That's a lot of traveling on low energy. Sean shrugged. It's up to you, Ev. We can take the long way there down the Bimini Road if you're feeling brave, or we can just go in with Devon later tonight. I don't want to wait until later. I turned to Devon. Would you be able to look after the tablet for us? Just bring it to Millie. She'll know how to keep it safe. And look out for Driscoll, too, please. He doesn't like staying in Port Anaris, but we need to make sure he doesn't leave. I'm worried about him, even though I know it's the safest place for him right now. Of course I will, Devon nodded. Even if Millie and I decide to come back to New York, I'll make it a point to check on Driscoll every day until you're back. Thank you. Anything else? Devon asked. I thought for a minute. There was only one other thing, but I wasn't sure if Devon had enough self-control to handle it on his own. Yes, I said, turning to Dom. There's this guy named Tano in Port Anaris. Devon stiffened again beside me. Make sure Devon doesn't kill him. You have my word, she said, pinning Devon with a hard gaze. All right then, let's do this. Devon stretched out his hands, and Sean and I took hold of them. I cast one final glance in Dom's direction before I plunged into the frigid split of our world. When I opened my eyes again, I was submerged in what felt like hundreds of miles of water. I hadn't been prepared for this and choked, holding my breath and trying to cough out the water that remained in my throat without actually opening my mouth. Sean grabbed me by the shoulders and smiled. Breathe. His voice was loud and clear, not garbled by the water or strangled by his lack of oxygen. Sean was breathing freely in the water. Devon, too. And something inside of me felt at ease, at peace with the whole situation, even though my mind was shouting at me to seek dry land. I can't, I said. The water filled my mouth, but the choking sensation abated. My body welcomed the salty water, craved it even. I was one with the sea, and the sea with me. Sean grinned. There you go. You don't have to worry about breathing here. Your body handles it for you, just like it allows you to see through the darkness and resist the pressure of the water above you. How far down are we? About 7 miles below the ocean's surface. There's no light here, and mortals would be crushed by the pressure. They haven't even gotten subs this deep, though they've gotten close, Devon said. Yes, they have, Devon argued. They just don't remember it. Our council does a good job of helping the mortals forget anything they shouldn't see. Speaking of not seeing things, I interrupted, where is Atlantis? I thought it was supposed to be the size of a giant city or a small country. It's here. Sean turned and gestured toward a small cave to my right. You just can't see it. It's been enchanted to remain hidden forever from all who are not welcome here. But the fact that you're able to talk and breathe and, not be crushed, means you'll be fine. They'll let you right in. We treaded water above what looked to be random stones on the ocean floor, but upon closer inspection, I realized it was actually a broken path of some sort. Is this the road you mentioned earlier? I asked Sean. Yep, the Bimini Road. It'll take you right past Port Anaris if you follow it long enough. But don't worry, you won't have to, Devon said. There are plenty of messengers in there who should be able to get you back home. Just have them send the bill to Millie. Is this goodbye, then? For now, but like I promised, I'll check on Driscoll every day and make sure nothing crazy is going on while you're gone. Devon grinned. Now, do us proud in there. Get that missing piece so we can get ready for our next adventure. You make it sound so easy. I gave Devon a quick hug and whispered in his ear, Take care of Millie, too, okay? He nodded. Will do. Good luck, guys. And in a flash, he was gone. Sean and I turned toward the cave a few yards away. After you. He gestured for me to go ahead. Though it should have been pitch black, my eyes somehow allowed me to see through the murky waters of the cave. It was empty, save for a small school of fish that dashed away as we approached. We'd only been swimming for a minute or so when I saw 2 faint blue glows up ahead. "Those are the guards," Sean whispered. "We're almost there." "Name?" a woman's voice called out as we neared. Her aura was a lighter blue than the man's across from her, but the way the light played off the walls of the cave was mesmerizing. "Sean Bratton." "Everly Gordon." "And what's the purpose of your visit?" The woman's eyes scanned us, and I prayed my aura still appeared blue under the water. "Everly has just recently gotten her powers, so I wanted to show her Atlantis for the first time." "I see," said the woman. Her gaze was sharp and lingering, and I struggled to stay calm. I felt like I'd been caught with my hand in the cookie jar when she looked at me like that. "Well, make sure you take her by Café de la Mer in the second ring. Cherise's croissants are to die for." The male guard's voice startled me. I'd almost forgotten he was there. "Are you really going to bring up the croissants again?" The woman finally turned away from me, putting her hands on her hips as she frowned at the other soldier. "It was an accident, okay?" I glanced at Sean, who shrugged with a grin. "So, can we proceed?" he asked the guards. "Go ahead." The woman waved us through and immediately began jesting with the other guard again. We swam past them and around a corner where I stopped dead in my wake. "What is that?" We stared into what looked like a shimmering wall, fully illuminated by something unseen on the other side. "That is Atlantis." And without another word, Sean disappeared through the wall. Chapter 18. It took all of 2 heartbeats for me to panic. No, panic wasn't the right word. I was mad. Sean brought me all the way down here, 7 miles under the sea, and past some goofy guards, just to leave me stranded here in this cave? I don't think so. I took one deep breath and dove toward the wall after him, not giving myself a chance to consider what might be on the other side, and I landed with a hard thud in the open air. "Graceful as always," Sean said with a chuckle. "You could have waited." I stopped mid-tirade as I realized where we were. Sean and I stood at the top of a craggy cliffside overlooking a world like I could have never imagined. Our feet were planted firmly on solid ground. We were somehow completely dry, and we breathed oxygen from the clear air, but I could still see the ripples of the Atlantic Ocean rolling around us. We were in a massive bubble of sorts, so large that I couldn't see the other side. The distant border was trimmed with jagged mountains, higher than the Rockies and more treacherous than the Himalayas. But between here and there sat a modern city designed in concentric rings circling out from a white palace in the very center. The earth was green and lush with plants and flowers, intricately placed throughout well-designed gardens, and though daylight seemed to fill the air, it wasn't quite like the light I knew from the earth above. There was no sun, no discernible source of energy that emitted the light. Instead, it was like the territory had an aura of its own. "Welcome to Atlantis," Sean said. "Come on, I'll show you around, and then we can try to find a way into the palace." He led me over to a steep stone stairwell that took us down the cliffside. "So the palace sits on the central island, as I'm sure you've noticed. It's the home of Maxwell and Gloriana, our leaders, and their daughter, Anastasia." "I thought they had 2 children." I remembered Sean mentioning something about the royal family, who they didn't actually call royal once before. "Their son is the youngest, so he's moved on to stay with cousins somewhere in Europe. Second children of the monarchs don't exactly have a purpose in the territories. They're kind of useless, really. Just supposed to sit tight somewhere safe in case something ever happens to the next in line for the throne." "Tate doesn't sit off to the side playing it safe." "Tate's situation is a little different, but let's focus on Atlantis. The central island houses all of the courtiers and official buildings. That's where we'll find my father, and hopefully our ticket into the palace. He stays in an apartment building for the councilmen and women while he's on business here in the main territory. Wait, how is Tate's situation different? I paused on the steps, partly to catch my breath because there were like a million stairs, and partly because Sean had piqued my curiosity about Tate's background even more. Tate's older brother is, well, let's just say that a lot of people don't believe he's fit to lead, so certain members of the Agarthian Council have made it their duty to show Tate's worth to the king, in the hopes that he will be chosen to lead instead. But the king is very stuck in his ways. He's a firm believer in tradition, so there's a rift in their ranks, and Tate is caught in the middle of it. It still seemed like I was missing a big part of the story, but that was more than anyone had ever told me before. I'd start watching for other clues regarding the Agarthian power structure when we got back home, but for now, I needed to remain focused on the task before me. Okay, so tell me about the rest of Atlantis. What am I looking at with all these circles? A ring of water circled the inner island. Around that was another ring of land, and the pattern repeated twice more. There was the island with the palace, and a total of 4 rings of land circling out from it, all connected by bridges. That's just the rest of the city. You'll see a mix of residential areas and businesses. There are different neighborhoods on the various rings. For example, the finance district is on Ring 1, with some of the fancier restaurants and shopping. And the agricultural areas are primarily on the outer ring, just because it's the largest and least convenient for traveling. But really, it's kind of a mixed bag. See the boats floating through all the canals? That's the main mode of transportation here. Well, that and the messenger service. It would take half a day to walk from the outer ring to the palace on foot, even with the bridge system. That's where the messengers make their money. That's fascinating. I admired the architecture as we finally reached the bottom of the stone stairwell, sleek and solid, but somehow completely cohesive with the more delicate gardens surrounding the structures. It was truly like nothing I'd ever seen before, and there were people, or Atlanteans I supposed, everywhere. The stairs took us straight into an open-air marketplace, which made sense with Sean's descriptions of this outer ring being mostly agricultural. The marketplace was bustling, and the stairs we'd come down turned into a sidewalk that led right alongside one of the canals that cut through this ring. A large boat was being loaded with produce down in the water below. "How far in are you going?" Sean asked one of the men loading up a box of greens. "All the way to the center," the man replied, "but I've only got 1 seat left." His bushy brows gathered in the middle as he glanced my way. "That's okay," I said, sidling up close to Sean and taking his hand. "I'll just sit in his lap." I nuzzled my nose along his jawline, trying not to pull back at the scratch of his 2-day baby beard. The man sat down his box and grinned at us. "Newly found soulmates?" "Are we that obvious?" I asked, pushing out my lips into a little pout. The man laughed. "Go ahead," he said, waving us on. Sean yanked his hand away from mine the second we were out of sight on the stairs taking us below deck. "Gross," he gritted through his teeth. "Your breath smells awful." "I didn't have a toothbrush at Millie's place this morning. Be nice. At least I got us on the boat." We entered the passenger area below, and I grabbed his hand again as we searched for the open seat. But unfortunately for us, we never got that far. "Sean! Everly!" This time I was the one who dropped his hand like a hot coal. "Is that—" "Hi, Mom." Sean's face reddened. "What are you doing here?" "I could ask you the same." Claudia's voice carried like she was speaking into a microphone. She only had 1 volume, and it was loud. The woman next to her looked up from the book she held with a frown. "When did you get your powers?" Claudia's gaze zeroed in on me. Just last week." "That's why we're here," Sean said. "Everly's having a hard time in her history class at school, so I thought I'd bring her here to give her better context, and show her some of the artifacts and things in person." "Huh." Claudia's mouth didn't fully close as her eyes still grazed over me, like she was looking for a chink in my armor. Then, as if shaking herself out of a daze, she turned back to Sean. "Well, I'm so glad you're here. I have been bustling myself trying to help your father prepare his big report for the convention coming up, and I just don't think there's any way we'll be able to get everything ready in time on our own. Any chance you two might be willing to help while you're here?" "Actually, we would love to." Sean nudged me in the side as he interrupted my objection. Following his lead, I flashed my prettiest smile to Claudia. "Just let us know how we can help." The woman next to Claudia closed her book with a huff. "Would you like to trade seats?" "Sure," Sean said. "We're, He scanned the small passenger area until he landed on a single seat across the aisle. "There." "Just one seat?" Claudia raised a brow. "It was all they had," Sean grumbled as he slid in next to his mother. What was already going to be an uncomfortable ride on Sean's knee just grew 10 times worse. But at least we were on the right track. Sean knew what he was doing. By agreeing to help his dad with the report, we were one step closer to accessing the palace and any hidden artifacts within. That missing piece of the tablet would be mine in no time. Chapter 19. Claudia talked through the entire ride. Everyone within a 10-foot radius knew that her husband was preparing a presentation for the annual Order of the Keepers Conference. She mentioned it to anyone with ears. But just underneath her outward display of hubris, she was actually a bundle of nerves. "I just don't know how they can expect him to be able to gather all the information he needs with the hours they have him working," she explained as we stepped off the boat. I only half heard the rest of her complaints. It was difficult to stay focused with the towering white palace shimmering before me. It was almost iridescent, like the whole palace was inlaid with mother of pearl. From where we stood, we could see people within the building, moving to and fro through the open-air passageways and across some of its numerous balconies. "This is amazing," I whispered. "Ah, yes," Claudia said, with a careless wave of her hand. "Welcome to the Atlantean Palace, home of our dearest leader, Maxwell." There was more than a hint of sarcasm in her tone. "Do they just let anyone in?" I asked, as I followed her up a stone pathway toward the 2-story double doors at the front entrance. The palace was maybe a quarter of a mile back from the canal, but it was so huge that I felt like we were standing on its doorstep. Other Atlanteans scattered as they exited the boat, taking sidewalks around the palace and into the rest of the central island. But I couldn't be concerned with what lay behind it. The structure was too breathtaking for me to pull my eyes away. "The first floor is open to the public," Sean explained. "There are a couple of offices and a small museum inside, and a large garden out back. The leader's residence makes up the top 2 floors, and the second and third floors are reserved for members of the council to do their business. But as the family of a councilman, we are granted access to the middle floors as well, which is great because we need to use the library to access the records required for Peter's presentation." With a haughty toss of her hair over her shoulder, Claudia marched ahead, straight for the palace doors, like she owned the place. "But I'm not family," I said, scurrying up the steps after her. Sean offered an apologetic shrug, but Claudia gave no response. "Hey, Mom, Everly's right. I'm not sure it's right to ask her to help out with Dad's presentation. I mean, we weren't really planning on coming all this way to hang out in the library." "Trust me." Claudia stopped dead in her tracks and spun around to face us. "If you help us with this, I will make sure you get to see far more history than any of the museums can offer. Don't forget, Sean, with a good presentation, we can expect a good promotion, which will lead to additional benefits a standard councilman couldn't dream of. Please, you have no idea how important this is to your father and me. We have been waiting a long time for an opportunity like this. This is our chance to get in tight with Maxwell." I sent a pleading look in Sean's direction. If what Claudia said was true, then maybe it would be in our best interest to help them out. We had no idea where the missing piece of the tablet could be right now, but if Sean's family got closer to the leaders, maybe we'd have a better shot at finding it. "All right, show us what to do." Sean's shoulders drooped, but he fell quietly into place behind his mother. I worked to keep my jaws shut as we strode through the palace. There was so much to see, and not enough time to take it all in. It was such an interesting mix of natural materials like abalone and coral, combined with all of the conveniences of modern technology. Screens filled one wall, showing a 24-hour news cycle from countries all over the world. The palace was illuminated by the same unseen light source as the rest of the city, and I couldn't tell if it was magic or just some advanced technology that they had yet to share with the mortals. Without warning, Claudia stopped again, maybe 10 yards away from a set of crystal-looking doors and the 2 guards who stood in front of them. She pulled Sean and me close and dropped her voice. "I probably should get this approved before telling you, but the information we need is not actually in the second-floor library. There's another." She glanced quickly over her shoulder at the guards. "In the basement." "We don't have approval to go down there," Sean said. "I took a test when your father was last promoted. I'm not sure if the privilege extends to you by default or not, but I know one of these guards personally. I'll see what I can do." I admired a grand staircase along the wall as they spoke. The steps were inlaid with the same mother of pearl as the exterior of the palace, and crystals dotted the banisters, glittering in the mysterious light of the massive space and sending a mosaic of colors across the walls. 2 more guards who stood sentry at the bottom watched our quiet discussion with cautious eyes. "Whatever we do, we should keep things moving. These whispers are drawing unwanted attention." I tilted my head back toward the guards in what I hoped was a totally natural and not at all suspicious-looking move. Claudia frowned. "Follow my lead." With a big fake smile plastered on her pretty face, she approached the first guards by the crystal doors. "Morning, fellas." She pushed her thumb onto a keypad outside the doors. A small light flashed green, and the guards pulled the doors open for her. "Thank you." Claudia gestured for Sean and me to go ahead, but one of the guards held out the staff in his hands, blocking our way. "Sorry, Mrs. Bratton, we'll have to scan you in one at a time." Claudia huffed. "We're in a bit of a hurry. They're with me, Marcus." She tried once again to shoo us on through the doors ahead of her, but the guards wouldn't relent. A shuffling of feet drew my attention back toward the stairs while she argued with her guard friend. The 2 of them went back and forth about the rules and Claudia's precious time, but I lost track of what they were saying as I watched a new crowd of guards descend the stairs. They were dressed a bit more formally than those on the first floor, and it only took a moment for me to realize why. In the center of their small circle, wearing a shimmering floor-length gown that I thought only existed in fairy tales, was a young auburn-haired woman. "They call her the Water Princess," Sean whispered behind me. "But rumor is she hates the nickname." "So that's Maxwell's daughter, Anastasia?" As though she heard my softly spoken words, her head turned in our direction at the sound of her name. Her eyes were as blue as her gown, and her lips as red as her hair. I guessed she was approximately our age, if not slightly younger. A look of innocent curiosity flitted across her delicate features as she took me in, but then her eyes landed on Sean, and her body language changed completely. She pointed toward us, whispering in the ear of one of her guards, who looked our way as she spoke. Then they were headed this way. "Hey, Mom." Sean placed a hand on Claudia's shoulder, but she was too busy arguing with the guards to pay him any mind. "Mom!" The footsteps were nearing us, and Claudia still had no idea. It wasn't until her friend Marcus shifted his gaze over her shoulder and stood at attention that she finally shut up. "What is going on here?" Anastasia's voice was surprisingly deep and raspy for such a delicate-looking thing. "My apologies." Marcus dropped into a deep bow. "We had a small misunderstanding, but there are no issues. Our people here were just leaving. I assure you they will not cause any additional interruptions to your mourning." "On the contrary," Anastasia grinned, pinning her eyes on Sean again. "I haven't been bothered at all. I'm quite intrigued to see some new faces in the palace." Sean's cheeks reddened, and I had to bite the inside of my lip to keep from laughing. But Claudia recognized what was going through the princess's head immediately. She straightened her shoulders, pulling back into the overconfident stance she held so well. "What an honor it is to be graced by your presence," Claudia cooed. Anastasia turned an appraising gaze in her direction. "What is it that you seek in my palace today?" "We simply wanted to access the basement library. My husband needs some records for a presentation your father has asked him to give at the convention." Anastasia turned to the guards. "Well, let them go," she said simply. "Only one of the 3 has clearance." "I see." She drank in the sight of Sean once again before turning back to the guard. "And do you have reason to doubt the integrity of these people?" "We don't. It's just protocol. Your father has systems in place to ensure the—" Anastasia waved him off. "I don't care about the protocol. If this is an issue of a security clearance, then perhaps we should find another way to gain my father's confidence in their loyalty. I'll arrange a meeting with him." Claudia perked up, her lips pulling into a pleased little smirk. "Tonight," Anastasia added. She turned and smiled at Sean. "Would you like to join me for dinner this evening?" I think, Sweat glistened on his forehead as he stammered. "Of course we would." Claudia dipped into an awkward curtsy. "Thank you so much for the generous invitation." "It will be my pleasure. 7 o'clock. Marcus will meet you here at the bottom of the steps and take you up to the dining hall. I am looking forward to it very much." Her gaze lingered on Sean for longer than was comfortable, even for me. But eventually, she and her entourage disappeared through the hall, greeting other Atlanteans who explored the vignettes of the first floor of the palace. "Holy cow, Sean!" I nudged him once I was certain she was out of earshot. "I don't know how you get all these gorgeous ladies fawning all over you, but I'm sure glad that you do." Claudia ruffled his hair. "Bratton men have always had a way with the ladies. Your father is going to be thrilled when he hears about this. I'll go tell him now. You two can go find a museum or whatever it was you were planning to do, but make sure you're back here in time for dinner. And here." She reached into her purse and pulled out a card. "Buy yourselves something decent to wear tonight." She gave a soft squeal. "There's no way they'll overlook our promotion after this." Chapter 20. "Are you sure I'm not underdressed?" I fussed with my hair, ducking so I could see my reflection in the compact mirror I had stacked on a pile of books. "You're fine. Gloriana insists on their family dressing like royalty, but no one else does. I think she's a little bitter that they're the only keeper leaders who don't call themselves kings and queens. You definitely don't have to dress like them. In fact, the wider the gap between our social status and theirs, the better her mood will probably be." "She sounds like a peach." I closed my compact and took a look at Sean, whose nose was buried in a book. He'd rushed me through what I hoped would be a fun-filled day of exploring Atlantean shops and fashions, just to hurry me back into the second-floor library for a quick cram session before dinner. I tucked the compact back into the messenger bag I'd brought with me from Millie's house, right next to my aura-changing pills and the dagger, then hid the entire bag behind some giant reference books in a hidden little nook of the library. I would have to hope it would be safe there until after our meal. We didn't have time to book a hotel room before the dinner. Apparently, hotels for lowly guardians like us were on the second ring of Atlantis, and it would have taken too long to get there and back before we needed to be ready. Which reminded me, it's almost time to go. I know, Sean said, crinkling his brow. I just wanted to make sure I get this right. He'd spent the last half hour studying up on everything that had ever been written about Maxwell and his family. He was treating this dinner like it was the most important test of his life. And I suppose it was, if you stopped to consider that the future of our people hung in the balance of the prophecy. Getting on Maxwell's good side would take us one step closer to finding the missing piece so we could get out of here and move on with saving the world or whatever I was supposed to do as a deliverer. But while we were here, I planned to live it up. So what does Atlantean royalty eat for dinner? Selkie pie? Messy stew? Sean closed his book and shot me a disapproving look. Ooh, maybe some kraken cake for dessert. Please don't embarrass me tonight. He placed the books back on the shelves where he got them and led me out into the hall. Sean put some effort into his appearance for the dinner, with his hair combed to the side in a classic but sophisticated style that suited him. He wore new navy slacks and a crisp white shirt that was buttoned one hole too high. I had to admit, he didn't look half bad for getting himself ready in a public bathroom, which was great news, because our likelihood of getting in good with the royal family was probably more dependent on Anastasia and how much she enjoyed admiring Sean's physique than any real qualifications. With that in mind, I decided to make some adjustments. I stopped him before we reached the door and undid another button at the top of his shirt, exposing a small hint of his chest, then gently tasseled his hair. Whether I say something embarrassing or not, I don't think it's possible to make you look bad in the eyes of the water princess. I thought I might have to wipe her drool away earlier. Sean rolled his eyes and kept walking. I hurried to keep up, my silver heels clicking on the hard floors behind him. My dress was simple, a pale, muted blue sheath with just a hint of shimmer when I moved. It would have been great for a night out at a restaurant back home, but I still wasn't convinced that it would be up to snuff at a royal dinner, or almost royal anyway. Claudia met us downstairs, wearing something between my casual cocktail attire and Anastasia's royal gown from earlier. It was a floor-length emerald green number, with a high collar and a mermaid-style flare at the bottom, fitting for an Atlantean. "You look wonderful," Claudia gushed over Sean as though I wasn't even there. That was just fine with me. I was perfectly content staying under the radar here. "I know how you hate being the center of attention, but I need you to lean into it tonight, okay? Play nice with the princess, and maybe she'll play nice with us." "I wouldn't call her princess." The guard Claudia argued with earlier stood tall at the bottom of the stairs that led up to the leader's private family residence. "Not if you want her to play nice." He cut a harsh look in Claudia's direction. "Oh, you know what I mean, Marcus. We just want everyone to enjoy themselves." He led us up the glossy stairs into a wide hall with polished white stone floors that glittered with sterling silver veins running through them. Another set of double stairs lay ahead, which I assumed led up to the bedrooms and personal suites of the family. From where we stood, the grand hall opened into several other large rooms. The dining room was on the left. It held an expensive bleached wood table adorned with crystal goblets and fine linens. 2 large chandeliers hung overhead, a dazzling combination of shells and crystals, with an occasional piece of blue sea glass for dramatic flair. Marcus gestured for us to go in, and we found seats in the middle of the table, leaving those at the head open for the not royal family. We just pulled out our chairs when the doors at the opposite end of the room opened. In strode 2 guards, followed by a curvy woman in a pewter-colored ball gown with fiery red curls piled high atop her head. Her eyes were a green that rivaled Sean's, but icy as she took us in. Anastasia came in after her mother, with more guards behind her. There was no sign of Maxwell. Marcus fell into a deep bow and made formal introductions. Mrs. Gloriana Ligon, wife of Maxwell Ligon, leader of Atlantis, and their daughter, Anastasia. The latter swept her gaze across the dining room until she landed on Sean, and her pretty rouge lips curled into a feline grin. Poor Sean. I wondered if he knew he was just man candy to her. Claudia Bratton, wife of Councilman and Level 2 security guard Peter Bratton, and her son Sean, and Miss Everly Gordon, niece of healer Mildred Gordon of Manhattan. My chest tightened at my introduction. Marcus hadn't asked for my name or any personal information, so this must have all come straight from Claudia. And of course, she didn't mention my mother. I'd always gotten the sense that Claudia looked down on me and my background. I watched Gloriana's reaction as well, but if the name rang any bells, she gave no indication of it. There was a small chance my mother was concealed in some secret enchanted prison here, but Gloriana didn't have to know about it if she was. "You can sit here, Sean." Anastasia gestured toward the chair beside her, and a guard immediately stepped forward to pull it out for Sean. Gloriana took a seat at the head of the table, with Anastasia and Sean to her right. Claudia immediately moved to the chair to Gloriana's left, which put me across from Sean. Gloriana's lips pursed as we took our seats, and I swore I saw the hint of an eye roll as she noticed her daughter's attention pinned on Sean. "Sit up straight, Anastasia. You look like a commoner all hunched over that way." "Yes, Mother." The girl's jaw hardened as she obeyed. Another young woman appeared from the kitchen, carrying a silver platter full of salad plates. I lifted my brows at Sean, excited to see what kind of strange creatures might adorn my bed of lettuce. But it was a typical dinner salad. Delicious, but not especially unique in any way. Anastasia peppered Sean with questions as we ate. Where did he go to school? What was he studying? What was New York really like? Did he have any siblings? How often does he come to Atlantis? Sean kept his answers short and to the point, but Claudia elaborated on his behalf any chance she got. That woman just loved to hear herself talk. She was trying a little too hard to make their family seem important, and Gloriana noticed. Midway through the main course, Gloriana set down her fork and turned to Claudia, who positively beamed under the direct attention until she realized she was about to be grilled. "Tell me about your family, Claudia." She straightened in her chair. "My husband, Peter, has been a valued member of the council for a little over a century now. He has done so well, in fact, that they've asked him to—" Gloriana shook her head and waved her hand for Claudia to stop talking. "No, I mean your parents, your background. Where did you grow up?" "Oh," Claudia giggled with a quiver in her voice. "There's not much to tell there, really. Just a normal childhood. Everly has a much more exciting history than I do." I could have kicked her under the table had I been better situated in my seat. It seemed Gloriana had touched on a hot topic with Claudia's family history. I'd have to file that away for later. The calculating green eyes of the matriarch of Atlantis focused on me, her thin auburn brows flicking up in feigned interest. "Really? You're so young. Tell me, what makes your history so exciting?" Sean tensed across the table from me. I couldn't tell if it was from Gloriana's questioning or the way her daughter's hand had found its way to the back of his chair, where she now lightly ran her fingers back and forth across the tops of his shoulders. "I don't know that I'd call it exciting. I was raised by my mother in a small town in Oklahoma, and I just recently came into my powers when I moved to New York with my aunt for college." "Oklahoma? Interesting." Gloriana dabbed at her mouth with a cloth napkin. "I can't recall any official business in that part of the country. Tell me what it is your mother does for us." "She was a messenger." I debated whether or not to say more, but ultimately decided to see how this played out. If Gloriana knew something about her whereabouts, I should be able to pick up on it from her expressions or tone. Otherwise, I could scratch Atlantis off the list of potential keeper prisons holding my mother captive. I didn't really expect her to be here anyway. Rossel was the last person I saw with my mother. If she was locked away, it was almost certainly in Olympus, which was unfortunate. As an Atlantean, I'd never be able to access the Olympian territory. I'd have to find another way to break her out. "Was a messenger?" Gloriana sat a little taller in her chair. "Has she passed?" "No, actually, she's traveling." Claudia leaned forward to block my line of sight with Gloriana. "She's traveling. Being an empty nester now, she thought it would be good to get out of Oklahoma, and who can blame her, really?" She laughed, an insidious sound that instantly left me suspicious. I had no reason to suspect Claudia had anything to do with my mother's disappearance, but her behavior tonight was odd. First, she drew Gloriana's attention to me and my family, then instantly turned her away from the truth. What was Claudia hiding? And more importantly, did my Aunt Millie know? The rest of the dinner was a blur. My mind was too busy working through the many new questions I had to focus on Claudia's obnoxious storytelling or Gloriana's glazed-over eyes. I couldn't even delight in Anastasia's over-the-top flirting with Sean or the way their hands were entwined as we finally stood from the dining table. "So you see, Mrs. Ligon, it would be very beneficial for everyone in the council if you would be so kind as to grant my son and our dear family friend access to the basement library. The information we compile will be of great use to everyone in attendance at the annual conference." Claudia mustered up as much poise as she had to win Gloriana's blessing and grant us the security clearance we required. She dropped hints about it all through the supper, but this was the first time she'd asked for Gloriana's blessing outright. "It may be," Gloriana pursed her full lips, "but it would be especially beneficial to your husband, who you believe to be incapable of doing the work on his own. What did you say his name was again? Peter Bratton?" The color blanched from Claudia's face. "Yes." "Very well. You may all have the clearance you need to access the basement library and prevent your husband from falling behind in his duties. I'll make note of our discussion with Maxwell so that he is aware of where our level 2 guards are lacking. Is there anything else?" "No, ma'am." Claudia looked like she might cry. Her plan had backfired. "Actually, Mother," Anastasia looped her arm through Sean's. "Sean mentioned that he and his friend were going to stay in a hotel while they were here. Could we possibly put them up in some guest rooms here in the palace instead?" The fire in her eyes fooled no one, and especially not her mother. Anastasia curved her body closer to Sean so that they were touching, and I'd never seen him look so uncomfortable. But Gloriana was so eager to end the evening that she simply waved her hand in the air as she exited the room. "Let it be done," she called out over her shoulder. Anastasia squealed with delight, and Sean looked sicker than his mother, who was already sulking back to the stairs. "Wait, Mom, didn't you say you needed us to help you with something tonight? We don't have to stay here." Sean's question sounded more like a plea for help. "No." She turned around, her expression hard and a new ferocity in her eyes. "You will help me more by staying here." Her gaze flicked over to Anastasia and back to her son. "I'll meet you downstairs at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. We'll go to the library then." Sean was frozen to the spot as his mother disappeared. This was a side of her I'd never seen, and I was appalled at the insinuation in her silent command. I wouldn't stand for it. I wouldn't let her walk all over my friend like that. No longer caring how Anastasia felt, I waltzed right up to Sean and took his hand in mine, pulling him away from her and toward the staircase. "We'll only need one room." I smiled sweetly at the girl, ignoring the burning glare I earned in return. But the soft squeeze of Sean's hand in mine was all the thanks I needed. I didn't believe in using other people for personal gain, and I refused to let Claudia hang Sean out like a piece of bait. Who cared if it angered Anastasia? Claudia had ruined her husband's chance at a promotion all on her own, and pleasing Maxwell's daughter wouldn't do anything to erase her mistake. Anastasia stomped up the stairs, and one of the palace maids showed Sean and me to our room. Thankfully, the bed was king-sized, so we never had to touch, and I had a full night to try and come up with a new plan for trying to locate the missing piece of the tablet. Chapter 21. "I think we should stick to the original plan, at least until we see how this plays out." Sean pulled on a dirty sock from the day before. All we had were the clothes we came to Atlantis wearing, shoved inside shopping bags from our trip to the boutiques for formal wear the day before. The messenger bag I'd brought from Millie's house was untouched, and I breathed a sigh of relief to find everything still tucked safely inside after retrieving it from the library first thing this morning. My aura would only remain blue for one more day before I'd need another dose of the pills Millie made for me. I certainly didn't want anyone in the palace to see my white aura. "We have access to some high-security areas now," he said. "Even if it's just a room full of boring legal documents, there may be something useful in the basement library. After all, it wouldn't be on the high-security floor if there wasn't something juicy in there, right?" "Right. But I don't know how much exploring we'll get to do while we're pretending to help your dad with his report. And after last night..." What was a nice way to tell Sean I didn't trust his mom? I chewed the inside of my lip, trying to think of something polite before finally just coming out with it. "I don't trust your mom." He laughed. "I'm not sure I do after last night either. She was pushing me at the water princess pretty hard." I didn't find it nearly as funny as Sean did. "But why are you feeling that way?" I pulled my feet up onto the bed, sitting cross-legged atop the duvet while Sean got his shoes on. "I've just been going over some of the things she said last night, and it has me wondering, do you think it's possible she might have something to do with my mother's disappearance?" "No, I really don't. But you obviously have some suspicions. What did she say to you?" "It was the way she butted in so fast to tell Gloriana my mother was traveling. It just seemed weird, especially since she had just directed the conversation to me and my family." Sean joined me on the bed. "She drew attention to you to avoid talking about her past. I love my mom, but she is a ridiculously prideful woman. She spends every minute of every day trying to get ahead in life. Her dad, my grandpa, was pretty shady. He got involved in the wrong crowd and wound up getting himself killed before I was born. My mom will do anything to avoid telling anyone that story. She likes to pretend she's always been from the upper class." "But why would she lie about my mother's disappearance?" "Because if Gloriana knew she was missing, it might have made her wonder if your family was wrapped up in some kind of criminal circle too. You're with me, and I bet my mom just wanted you to look just as rosy as a make-believe world she pretends to come from. She's sensitive to that kind of stuff." "If you say so." I wasn't so sure I believed it, but then I also couldn't see any motive for Claudia to abduct my mom. "All right, back to the plan. Are you thinking we should just search the library for any hint of the prophecy while we're supposed to be helping your dad? I guess. I've never been down there before. I'm not even sure what he does in the basement. He's a guard, right? So he must be protecting something important. I lifted my brows, but Sean shook his head. There's no way it'll be that easy. But what if it is? What if we walk down those stairs and find your dad standing in front of the broken tablet piece up on a pedestal under the lights, just waiting for us to take it? Sean snorted. Keep dreaming. Obviously, I was wrong. There was no pedestal, no tablet, not even any overhead lights, just the same mysterious brightness that filled the rest of Atlantis. I had to bite my tongue as Claudia inquired about Sean's evening with the princess on our walk down the basement stairs. Part of me wanted to kick out a leg and trip her. There was no way my mother would have ever put me in the situation Claudia put Sean in. He was right. She operated purely out of selfish gain. And yet, it was my mom who had been kidnapped and locked away. The world really wasn't fair. Marcus led us down into the basement now that we had Gloriana's blessing, and with all the hoops we had to jump through to get it, I guess I'd expected something more interesting. Instead, what we found at the bottom of the stairs was a small lobby leading into a sterile-looking hall lined with doors. It resembled an old Oklahoma high school, more than a high-security floor of a supernatural palace under the sea. I was a little disappointed. A plain desk was situated off to the side of the lobby, and behind it sat another guard, only this one wasn't Atlantean. Is that an Olympian? I asked Sean quietly as his mother approached the blonde-haired man. Yep, there aren't many other races here, but occasionally someone will formally withdraw from their own territory. The wards on Atlantis keep out anyone with ill intent, so we know they are loyal to us here, or else they'd be killed. We employ them, but once they pledge themselves to Atlantis, they can never leave, not even to visit the mortal lands. Is it the same in the other territories? You can't enter unless your intentions are good? Sean nodded. You've got to be the territory's primary race, or willing to dedicate the rest of your life to serve them. That's why it's so rare. But why would anyone choose to leave their own people behind? I turned my gaze back to the Olympian guard, who was now speaking into an intercom. Sean shrugged. People have their reasons. Dom wasn't kidding when she told me before that it would be very difficult to access other keeper territories, but I didn't realize I'd have to dedicate my life to them just to enter. That would certainly complicate things. Claudia turned away from the guard with a roll of her eyes. They insist that we can't enter the library without your father, even though I told him that Gloriana herself gave us clearance to be here. That's all right, Sean said, stepping forward to calm his mother. I'm sure Dad won't mind letting us in. Sean was wrong. His dad did mind, very much. We heard his footsteps pounding down the hall before we ever saw him, and when he finally rounded the corner, I realized where Sean had inherited his guardian physique. Peter Bratton was a hulk of a man, and at the moment he looked like he might want to smash something. Claudia? His tone was venomous. What are you doing down here? I told you I didn't need your help, and yet you came anyway. His eyes cut over sharply to where Sean and I stood. With our son? And who are you? Everly Gordon, sir. Nice to meet you. I extended a hand, which he ignored. You do need our help, Claudia interjected. Especially now. We've got to make this the best presentation any guard has ever given. Let us get started so you can get back to work. From the look on Peter's face, I knew she'd already confessed her blunder from the night before. He was seething as he cut his eyes over to me again. I can understand why they'd want to help, seeing as how my paycheck puts those expensive clothes on their backs. But what's in it for you? Nothing, I shrugged. I was here with Sean, exploring Atlantis, when your wife asked us to help. We've got the extra time, so I thought I'd contribute however I can." His gaze narrowed, and I tried my best to keep an innocent smile on my face. I wanted to look friendly and helpful and naive, like a normal girl who wasn't secretly going to search for ancient artifacts as soon as he turned his back. "Fine, but only because they've got me scheduled to stand guard for 60 hours over the next week." "What do you guard?" I asked, a bit too casually. "That," Peter snapped, "is none of your business." And that's the moment I knew I would have to abandon the research for his report and focus my attention on Peter instead. I trusted Sean with my whole heart, but his family was up to no good. I could feel it. Chapter 22. Peter's face was etched with a permanent grimace as he showed us to the library. Once again, I was let down by what we found. Library, it turned out, was just a fancy word for filing room. While shelves lined the walls, the center and majority of the room was comprised of rows of gray filing cabinets, standing still like a small army of lifeless robots. "Nothing you see in this room can leave. The information you'll find here is strictly confidential, and the files are cursed to prevent anyone from taking them and living to tell about it. Claudia can explain the details of my presentation, but I need information gathered from the census reports of a certain segment of our population." "Oh, for crying out loud, Peter, just say it. They're going to discover it soon enough anyway." Claudia turned to Sean and me. "Peter stands guard for a high-security prison here under the palace. These aren't your average criminals. They're intelligent, and the only reason they're being kept alive is for collateral with the other territories, or because we believe they have information that we need." "How did they survive?" I asked. "How are they living here with the wards?" Claudia looked at me like I was an idiot. "Maxwell can allow anyone to enter who he wishes. That's one of the perks of being a leader." She shook her head. "Anyhow, extra security is needed for these criminals, despite the enchantments on the cells themselves. So Peter has been working long hours lately while they're short-staffed. But if he presents the information required at the annual convention coming up and does a good job, he could very well be in line for the next warden position, which is a fast track to palace guard." She clasped her hands excitedly in front of her chest. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves," Peter frowned. "Just gather all the census reports from the last century for the high-security prisoners and create a spreadsheet for me. I'll handle it from there." And so we did, or two of us did, anyway. While Sean and Claudia worked to gather and input information into Claudia's laptop, I explored the cabinets under the ruse that I was searching for the 1954 files, which I had conveniently hidden from the first drawer I opened. At first I was surprised at how antiquated the filing system was for such a high-tech territory, but then I figured it was actually pretty standard for official government files to be way behind the times, even for supernaturals. And I was grateful for it. The lack of organization gave me plenty of opportunity to snoop around. We worked that way the entire morning, and I was losing hope by the time lunch came around. After quickly scarfing down tuna sandwiches, we were back at it. I avoided Claudia as much as possible because I didn't trust myself not to mouth off to her. What little respect I had for the woman had gone down the drain. It was a wonder Sean turned out as good as he did with parents like that. Near the end of the day, I was prepared to throw in the towel. I'd searched probably 30 different filing cabinets, each one full of more boring documents than the last. There was nothing but papers and court records and more papers. With a frustrated huff, I shoved the bottom drawer of my last cabinet closed and heard a rattle. "Did you break it?" Sean chuckled from over my shoulder. "I hope not." I opened the drawer again and pulled all the files forward to see if the tracks were still sturdy. At the very back of the drawer, tucked behind all the folders, lay a single key. It had to have been at least 100 years old. "Hey, check this out." Sean looked over my shoulder at the dusty object. "What does it go to?" "I don't know," I said, blowing off the dust, "but I'm going to find out." I tucked the key into my pocket, checking first to make sure Claudia wasn't watching. Maybe it was nothing, but maybe it would grant me access to some of the other secrets hiding here under the palace. We'd have to wait to find out, though. The library hours matched a standard Atlantean workday. It was closing, and Claudia expected us to join her for dinner. Later that night, after we'd eaten an awkward meal with Claudia, Sean and I excused ourselves early to retreat back to our guest room in the palace. Locking the door behind us, I finally pulled the key back out of my pocket and laid it on the bed. I'd been waiting very impatiently for the opportunity to make a plan, since we'd found it earlier that day. "It looks too old to be of any use," Sean said. "All the doors downstairs are too modern for it to work." I wouldn't be so sure about that. I ran my finger across the key's smooth surface. There aren't any serrations on it. It's a skeleton key. Besides, we've only seen a small number of those doors downstairs. Perhaps the older mysteries are hidden behind older doors. "Always the optimist," Sean said. "How do you propose we get back down there?" "Well, I've been thinking about that, too, and I have a hypothesis. You know how every once in a while I'm able to stop time? I think it might be connected to the prophecy somehow. It seems like every time I'm getting closer to learning something about it, my powers kick into gear. So maybe, if exploring the rest of the basement gets us closer to the missing piece of the tablet, my powers will activate, and I'll be able to stop time to slip past the guards." "That's a lot of maybes," Sean said with a frown. "That's the best I've got." I reached into my bag and pulled out the bottle of pills. "But I also have some amplifiers here in my little bag of tricks. Maybe an extra dose will help. I'm due for another one in the morning anyway." "Another maybe." Sean shook his head. "All right, but if something happens to you from taking it again too soon, I can't help you. I have 0 healing abilities." "I'll be fine," I said, and I hoped it was true as I dropped the pill on my tongue and swallowed before I could think better of it. When we were testing the pills out, Millie and Tate had me taking them every day at first, and I was perfectly fine. At this point, I'm not even sure if the amplifier works anymore, but I figured it's worth a try. I sat on the edge of the bed, waiting for something to happen. "How do you feel?" Sean asked after a few minutes. "Exactly the same. How do I look? Is my aura any different?" "Just as blue as before. How long should we wait for something to happen?" "It was almost instant back at Millie's house. I'd say we're good to go." "Right now?" Sean's eyes widened. "There's no better time than the present." I pulled Rossel's dagger from my bag and tucked it into my waistband, hoping we wouldn't need it. Then we slipped out of our room and into the hall. The lights were dimmed with the late hour, and no one was around, not even the maids. Even so, I kept my voice at a whisper as I laid out my plan for Sean on our way down. I haven't found a way to keep anyone else awake with me while I stop time, but I can move you like a statue. So once we reach the bottom of the stairs, I'll push pause on reality and just pedal you through the halls with me. The first place I want to check is the prison, just in case." Sean nodded, understanding my motive. "Then I figured we could just try out all the other doors, see if any of them will open with the key." "How long are you able to keep time stopped?" Sean asked. "I got probably 10 minutes or so when I was at the warehouse with Rossel. It'll be long enough to get out of sight of any guards on the night shift. But your mom said they were short-staffed right now, so I'm hoping we don't run into too many." A faint whimper from the landing below stopped our conversation short. Sean and I both looked through the darkness of the entry hall to see where the noise was coming from. All I could make out was a pile of lavender silk in the corner of a small sitting area off to the side. "Sean?" Anastasia rose from a heap on the floor, quickly wiping the tears from her eyes. "Is everything okay?" Sean rushed forward, always a protector. Being a guardian was innate in him. He couldn't help but come to her rescue, no matter how she'd viewed him before. "Yeah, of course," Anastasia lied. "I was just looking for a ring I dropped, but I found it. See you later." She quickly moved away from him, trying to hide her sniffle under a fake cough. Sean held out his hand and placed it gently on Anastasia's forearm to stop her. She halted immediately, lifting her glossy, bloodshot eyes to his. "Are you sure? Because I'll help you if something is wrong." Her floodgates opened then, and she buried her face into his shoulder, letting the tears pour freely. "It's just my parents again. Nothing I do is ever enough, and they act like having me as the heir is a burden for them. They wish I'd been a boy. But I don't even want to be the leader of Atlantis. If they want a boy so bad, they should train up my brother instead of just enabling his bad decisions." She sobbed loudly. "I'm sorry. I don't know why I just told you all of that. Please forget I said anything." She pulled back and wiped the snot from her nose. "I get it," Sean said, gently patting her back. "Believe me, I know what it's like to have parents with impossible standards." "You do?" Anastasia rested her cheek on his shoulder again. Sean glanced at me over the top of her head and silently mouthed for me to go ahead. I hated to leave him behind with the waterworks princess, but she seemed pretty harmless in her current state, and Sean knew how to take care of himself anyway. I needed to get the tablet. That was my priority. After waiting another minute to make sure he was okay, I bid Sean a silent farewell and continued downstairs on my own. The first floor of the palace was empty. The front doors were closed to the public at this hour, and the guards had gone home for the evening, but I knew that wouldn't be the case downstairs in the basement. I slipped through the doors without being seen, and my confidence was rising as I reached the bottom floor unscathed. A quick peek around the corner revealed the Olympian guard's desk to be empty, and I released the breath I'd been holding on my descent. I entered the lobby and paused for a beat, allowing the adrenaline to filter through my system before trying any of the doors. With the key in hand, I made for the hallway a moment later, only to stop dead in my tracks at the sound of a toilet flushing. I squeezed my eyes shut, imagining everything around me coming to a stop. This was it, my chance to put my powers to use and see what those amplifiers could really do. Pressure built in my chest, and I opened my eyes to find the world exactly as I'd left it. It was still and quiet, but had time actually stopped? My question was answered by the sound of someone whistling and pushing open the bathroom door. There wasn't time for another try. I spun on my heels and made a mad dash for the stairs, taking them two at a time until I was safely out of sight. The pressure in my chest was gone, and a new pressure was building behind my eyes. I blinked away the tears of frustration before they could fall. What good were my powers if I couldn't even use them when I needed them? What kind of Atlantean was I? With a deep breath, I headed back for the stairs, trying to convince myself that everything would be okay. I still had the key. I'd just have to find a different way to use it. Chapter 23. Sean got up early the next morning to meet Anastasia for breakfast. "She's really not so bad when you get to know her, and she apologized for how she treated me the other night. Her parents are pushing her to marry early because they don't trust her to lead Atlantis on her own." "Because she's a woman?" Sean grimaced. "Not all Atlanteans are horrible. I know you've seen an ugly side to our people since you've been down here, but I promise, some of us are good." "I know. My mom was good. Is good," I corrected myself as I ran a brush through my hair. Anastasia had sent some new clothes and toiletries to our room as a thank you for Sean cheering her up. I felt like a new woman in some clean underwear and freshly washed hair. "I'm gonna go look for her today." "Your mom? How? I thought you said your time-stopping didn't work last night." "People have been sneaking around without the ability to stop time for centuries. I'm sure I'll find a way." The truth was, I didn't have a clue what I was going to do. I just knew I had to act soon. Our work in the library for Mr. Bratton was nearly finished, and our excuse to be in the palace would expire once it was complete. I had to do something today. Sliding Rossel's dagger into the back of my waistband and under my shirt, I made my way down to the library with Sean after breakfast and waited for my opportunity to get out. I'd considered my different options all morning, and after about half an hour of pulling files, I finally landed on a classic move from all the old 80s high school movies I'd seen about kids getting out of class. "Hey, Claudia, do you know where the restroom is?" "It's a couple of doors down the hall on your right," she said, never pulling her eyes from her laptop screen. We were in the final push for the report, and she had buried herself in spreadsheets, trying to get everything perfect for her husband. Of course, I already knew where the bathroom was, after my close encounter with the guard the night before, and I knew it was in the direction I wanted to go. Sean and I locked eyes briefly as I made my way to the door, a silent understanding passing through us that this was it. I was making my move. I nodded a greeting to the Olympian guard in the lobby outside of the library and turned deeper into the hallway. Play it cool, Everly. I made a pit stop in the bathroom, confirming my alibi and checking my reflection in the mirror while giving myself a mental pep talk. And I noticed a supply closet against the wall near the mirrors that gave me an idea. I tried the knob and found the closet locked, just as I expected. This was the perfect opportunity to test out my new key. I pulled it from my pocket and pushed it into the lock, but it wouldn't fit. I couldn't even get the stupid key inside. That's okay, I thought to myself, taking a deep breath. I didn't care about bathroom supply closets. I cared about finding the Atlantean piece of the prophecy. I wouldn't give up on the key yet. Poking my head back out into the hall to make sure it was clear, I eased through the door and spun around the corner into a deeper part of the basement. I hadn't been back this far before, and I knew my time was short before Claudia grew suspicious of my absence. I'd have to act quickly. With my key at the ready, I tested a couple of locked doors as I went, none of them working. The problem was that nothing was marked. I had no idea if I was breaking into someone's office or a janitorial closet. The only markings on the walls were small numbers above the rooms: 037, 039, 041. But still I continued ahead toward a set of white double doors at the end of the hall. They were locked as well, and solid metal with no room for a key. Instead, there was a fingerprint scanner on the wall outside, a high-security zone on a high-security floor. I must be getting close. But I didn't dare try my own fingerprints. Perhaps there was another way in. I twisted the knob to my right, fully expecting it to be locked like all the others, so I nearly fell in as the door swung open with ease, and I almost laughed as I stumbled into a broom. At least I got one open. Feeling a little more confident, I tried for the room across the hall as well. Locked. Then I heard a whir and a click from the double doors beside me. I dove back for the janitorial closet, but I wasn't fast enough. The door swung open, and I slid my body behind one, hoping the door itself would shield me from the sight of whoever was coming through. Please don't be Peter. Please don't be Peter. Please don't be Peter. It wasn't. It was a guard I didn't recognize. And by some miracle of the sea, he didn't see me as I swung around to the backside of the door and slipped to the other side. He was too distracted, running in the opposite direction and yelling into some kind of walkie-talkie. "Unmanned. I'm searching now." I didn't stop to consider what he meant as the doors closed behind me, sealing me off in the high-security area. Everything on this side of the doors was different. Gone were the white walls and sterile feel of the basement library. This was more in line with what I would have expected to see in the basement of an ancient palace, unrenovated, unrestored, buzzing with magic. The light was dimmer, bluer on this part of the floor. Maybe it was just the way it played off of the rough stone floors of a hall that looked like it had been carved through a mountain. There was a chair, empty, to my left, and ahead of me, lining both sides of the hall, were prison cells. I inched forward slowly at first, afraid to let the prisoner see my face. The hilt of Rossel's dagger dug into my back as I walked, reminding me of how dangerous this could be if I wasn't careful. But I had to know if my mom was here. The first cell was empty, but a cough drew my eyes to another one across the hall. Inside sat a small woman with pale skin and golden eyes. Her hair hung in limp strands around her gaunt face. She may have once been beautiful, but now the Agarthian woman looked too sick and frail to even stand. "Please, miss, there's been a mistake. I need to go to the infirmary. Please." She lifted one shaky hand into the air. I stepped closer, eyeing the woman carefully. She didn't look cruel, but I was no fool. Claudia had mentioned the intelligence of these criminals, and I knew I was being manipulated. But still, curiosity tugged me closer to her. She stared back at me, those golden eyes hollow and tired, but also full of cunning and experience. After a long look, I shook my head. I didn't know what the woman had possibly done to end up here, but I didn't have time to ask. I needed to keep searching. "I'm sorry," I said, stepping back. The woman leapt to her feet and jabbed a bony arm through the bars of her cell, reaching out for me with a wicked sneer. But she was just shy of making contact. I'd moved in the nick of time. I made a mental note not to get too close to any of the other prisoners, and ignored her loud and crude insults as I moved on to the other cells. A few other prisoners sat quietly, watching me make my way down the hall. One old Olympian man sang a sad song in a language I'd never heard, and at the very end of the hall sat a young red-haired Atlantean man, not any older than myself. I drew nearer, studying his features as he slept on the hard floor of his cell. Why would an Atlantean be locked up in the palace prison under extra protection, and why did he seem familiar to me? It didn't matter, I supposed, as I reached the end of the row. My mother wasn't here, though I couldn't say whether that was a relief or not. It would have been nice to have her with me again, helping me navigate the strange waters I now found myself in. Did she know? Did she know that I was the deliverer? A clatter from behind whipped my attention back to where I started, as the double doors slammed open with enough force to shake the walls. My feet were frozen to the spot, paralyzed with fear, as Peter Bratton stormed into the prison hall. He was nearly twice the size I'd last seen him, his guardian powers fully activated. Then came Sean, sprinting in behind him, breathless and equal parts angry and afraid. "Everly, run!" Chapter 24. It sounded like a good idea in theory, but I couldn't run. There was only one way out of this hall, and Peter Bratton blocked the exit like a wall, a raging bull of a wall. "You!" He pointed at me with a finger the size of a sausage. "Who are you, really?" The prisoners were all on their feet now, fingers wrapped around the bars of their cells, grinning widely as they anxiously awaited whatever show was about to take place. "I told you, I'm just a friend of the family." I raised both hands in the air, showing Peter I meant no harm, while simultaneously trying to stir up any kind of power that might still be inside me. The well was empty. I still had no power. "Liar!" He threw something. It moved so fast I couldn't make out what it was. It slammed into my gut like a sucker punch, knocking the air out of me and landing on the ground in front of me with a thud. "Dad, stop!" Sean yelled, but Peter just pushed him aside. I looked down to see what hit me and yelped as I noted all of the pills Millie made me scattered from the bottle lying broken on the floor. He must have gotten them from our room, unless Sean passed them over to him. Did Sean betray me? Glancing up again, I tried to stay brave and stand tall, even as Peter Bratton stalked his way over to me. Sean grabbed at his arms, trying to slow him down, but it was no use. The man was a machine. He stopped about 3 feet in front of me and stomped on what was left of the pills, crushing them into dust. "Try drugging the prince now, you little traitor!" "What?" My confusion was spoken in unison with a voice behind me. Sean and Peter both turned their attention over my shoulder, so I followed their gaze to the red-haired Atlantean boy in the last cell. "What are the drugs?" the boy asked. "I don't have any drugs," I said. "I don't know what you're talking about. I don't even know who you are." "I don't believe you for a second," Peter snapped. "Who are you working for?" "I'm not working for anyone." "Where are the drugs?" the boy repeated, a frantic glaze over his hazel eyes. "I told you, there are no drugs." I was losing patience. Someone had seriously gotten their wires crossed, and I didn't want to be caught in the middle. If Peter wanted to be angry about me sneaking in here without permission, that was one thing, but to accuse me of drugging prisoners? It was absurd. "Are you Baldric?" Sean stepped toward the boy, whose frenzied expression turned to surprise. The boy looked to Peter before answering. "I am." "Not another word," Peter growled. "Why not?" a raspy voice called out from the other end of the hall. "Afraid the truth might get out about my brother being an addict?" All eyes turned toward Anastasia, who stood with 2 of her guards in the doorway. The frail female Agarthian prisoner near the front of the hall loosed a laugh like a hyena. Peter gritted his teeth and dropped into a bow. "Forgive us, Miss Ligon, for disturbing you. I've just caught this girl feeding your brother's habit. I believe she may be working with the enemy." "Nonsense." Anastasia picked up her skirts and marched forward, completely unafraid of the man. "You 2 may go," she said to her other guards. "Wait upstairs until I'm finished here. It looks like we may need to have a personal conversation." She waited to speak again until we were alone. "What evidence do you have?" Peter gestured to the powder on the floor. "She's a stranger, a face I've never seen from parents no one knows. She shows up, weasels her way in with my family, and enters the palace with a bottle full of pills. She doesn't have access to this area, yet here she is. What else would bring her here?" "Perhaps she was trying to locate the man who broke into her private room and rummaged through her personal things. Perhaps she was prepared to confront the thief who stole her medication." Peter's face reddened. "I was gathering evidence." "You were setting a trap and embarrassing a guest of this palace, and you've caused undue stress on Baldric that you know he cannot sustain." Anastasia was fuming. Over her shoulder, I saw a frown tugging at Sean's mouth. "I won't let it happen again." "Charbaran?" she called out. "No, please, don't involve Charbaran. I can make it up to you." Peter dropped to his knees. The Olympian guard entered the prison hall. "Yes, Miss Ligon." "Peter Bratton is no longer a guard of Atlantis. He is to be removed from his position, effective immediately. He shall never step foot inside this palace again, and he shall be struck dead on the spot if he ever speaks of the confidential information he has gleaned in his work here, including personal matters surrounding my family." Her eyes cut briefly to the boy behind bars, who had settled back onto the floor in a daze. "Yes, Miss Ligon. Follow me, sir." There was pity in the Olympian guard's eyes as he gestured for Peter to get on his feet and follow him. We waited in silence as Peter's sobs drifted down the hall and out through the double doors. Anastasia pierced me with a glare the moment they swung shut again. "Now," she said, "you better have a very compelling reason for being here with my brother." Chapter 25. I do have a good reason, and I promise I did not know your brother was here. I was told that he lived in Europe. I glanced from Anastasia to Sean and back again. I'm here to look for someone else, a missing person who I thought could have been locked away here in the palace prison, but she's not. I'm sorry we caused such a scene. How did you know we were down here? Sean tipped me off this morning at breakfast. He said he was worried his father was up to something, so I sent a guard and some palace staff on a mission to watch for anything suspicious. Peter abandoned his post this morning, leaving the prisoners completely alone, and one of my maids reported him in your room. Knowing how he can get at times. She looked briefly at Sean. I figured it would be best to handle the situation myself, though I'm surprised to find you here. What are the pills? I tried to swallow the lump in my throat. Thankfully, I took an extra dose the night before, otherwise I would have been in serious trouble. We couldn't stay in Atlantis much longer either way, though. Without the pills, I had a hard deadline before my aura returned to white. They're kind of like supplements, specially made for me by my aunt. She's a healer. Anastasia's eyes narrowed. I'll say this only once. I have a knack for feeling out lies. You lie to me, and you're done. But these half-truths you're speaking, they're not going to work either. I suggest you tell me the whole truth. Now. Tate had once said he knew about the Deliverer prophecy because he'd overheard it during some of his brother's lessons. And through my conversations with Driscoll and Rasputin, I had surmised that all royalty, and hopefully non-royal leaders too in this case, learned of it, in order to keep rumors and rogue explorers under control in the Keeper territories. Assuming all of that was true, Anastasia would have heard of the prophecy as well. Whether or not she believed it was another story. And then there was the question of whether or not she'd let me live if she discovered who I really was. Sometimes the truth is less believable than a lie, I said. Try me. Okay. I steeled myself, preparing for whatever reaction I might get from her. The pills keep my aura blue. Sean's jaw dropped and Anastasia's hardened. You're not Atlantean? I am, but my aura is different. How is it different? She crossed her arms over her chest, not fully buying what I had to say, but staying remarkably open-minded to my explanation. It's white. The Agarthian prisoner at the front of the hall gasped and covered her mouth with a frail hand. At first I thought she was mocking me, but then she dropped to her knees and bowed her face down low to the ground. Anastasia turned to look at the prisoner, and her expression was completely different when she met my eyes again. What does that mean? She asked. Her demeanor had changed from defensive to inquisitive, curiosity written plainly across her face. Have you heard of the Deliverer? I gave her a condensed version of my story. I told her my mother went missing the same day I found the first piece of the tablet, and that the stone responded to me. Sean confirmed that my aura was white, and that I'd stopped a storm to save his life. We left out anything about Driscoll. There was no need to add any more danger to his life, and I didn't tell her about my ability to stop time. I wasn't even sure if it was an ability anymore, or just a strange coincidence that occurred any time my friends or I were about to die. I know this sounds crazy, I said, And maybe you've even been raised to believe that I am somehow your enemy. But I can assure you, I don't want to hurt anyone. I just want to find my mom and figure out what this prophecy really means." Anastasia's eyes grew misty as she looked back at her brother, who was now sleeping on the floor of his prison cell. "Do you really think you can do it?" "Do what?" "Change the world?" She set her tear-filled eyes back on me. "Remove the keepers from power. Get us out of this eternal loop of tragedy and greed. Deliver us from the shackles of this responsibility that turns man against man." Sean reached out for her hand and gave it a gentle squeeze, but he remained silent. And while Sean worked to calm Anastasia, something awakened in me. Her words reminded me of the magnitude of this prophecy and the task that lay before me. It was about so much more than finding my mom. It was about setting people free and exterminating evil from the face of the earth and the depths of the sea. My inner Athena raised a sword at the thought. "Yes," I said with confidence. "I know that I can." "Then follow me." All of the prisoners watched us carefully as we made our way back through the hall. There was a different feeling in the air. Respect, maybe, or fear, or the thrill of knowing something big was about to happen. I felt it too. Sean and I followed Anastasia through the double doors and back into the sterile basement toward the library, but she stopped at another door on her way, 045. There was a fingerprint scanner there on the wall, and it opened at her touch with a whir and a click. She ushered us through, and I was surprised to find that we were in another hallway rather than a room. The halls here more closely resembled the prison than the library, with stone floors and that odd blue-tinted light, and they quickly turned into more of a maze than I could keep up with. "I'm sorry about your dad," I said quietly to Sean after a few minutes of walking. "He had it coming." Sean's face remained hard. I'm sure it wasn't easy to see his father fall so egregiously from grace, but I didn't know much about their relationship. Maybe Sean was right, and this wasn't Peter's first infraction against him or the people of Atlantis. Maybe he did have it coming. "Is Charbaron?" "A curse maker," Sean said flatly. But the conversation stopped there along with Anastasia. She placed a hand on the doorknob before her and turned back to face us. "I haven't been in this room in ages. It contains a collection of artifacts and secrets from our history. Few have access to the room, and it is important that you never speak of it to another living soul. Can I have your word on that?" "Absolutely," I said. Sean agreed as well. "Thank you." Anastasia closed her eyes and inhaled deeply before twisting the knob. "I think you may find what you're looking for here." The moment the door swung open, I felt it, beating along with my own heart. Chill bumps dotted my skin as something invisible pulled me into the room. The broken piece of the tablet was waiting for me somewhere here. The interior of the room, once again, was drastically different from the halls outside. This room, though it had the same stone floors and walls of the hallway maze we'd left, also had been updated with 10-foot-tall cases made of wood and reinforced glass. Inside each case lay a wide array of objects from another time and place, similar to the collection I'd seen in the basement of Rossel's gallery. There were goblets and books and sculptures and other objects I couldn't identify. But I wasn't interested in any of that. The invisible thread pulled me even deeper into the room, with Sean and Anastasia now trailing behind me. My heart thumped harder and harder as we neared the back, and we all saw it at once. A blue glow emanated from a cabinet on the very farthest wall, brighter and a more alluring color than the rest of the territory's mysterious light. Anastasia gasped. It's true. I ran forward and placed my hands on the glass, wanting so badly to rip it apart and take hold of what was mine. The prophecy was begging to go with me. We wouldn't be complete until we were together. "How do you get it out?" I asked. "They're permanently sealed. We'll have to take the cabinet apart. There is no door or other way to access it that I'm aware of." I searched the room for something heavy enough to break it open, but there were only more cabinets. Pulling the dagger from my waistband, I turned the hilt toward the glass and prepared to strike. "Wait!" Anastasia grabbed my arm. "The moment you make impact with the cabinet, sirens are going to blare through the basement. We'll have guards on us in 30 seconds or less, and they can't know that I've helped you. It would be best if they didn't know who took the tablet at all." "So you'll let us take it then?" I hadn't even stopped to consider that I was stealing a valuable piece of history right in front of the Water Princess. "If you promise to do what needs to be done, fulfill the prophecy, and it's yours." "Thank you. I promise." I met her eyes and tried to convey that I would do anything within my power to stay true to my word. I think she understood. "There's a hidden passage behind these walls. I just have to remember how to access it. Give me just a minute." Anastasia ran her hand along the walls of the room, feeling along each of the rough edges of the stone. Sean joined her, and I tried to remain patient as they felt their way across the room. "Is this it?" Sean asked, sliding his fingers down a thick line in the rock. Anastasia rushed to his side to take a look. "Yes. Help me pull it." Together, they dug in with their nails. I stepped to help them out, when suddenly a portion of the wall moved forward with a sleepy groan. The hallway behind it was dark and dank. It would be perfect for our escape. "You won't be able to leave Atlantis through the main gate," Anastasia warned. "These tunnels will lead you to a back exit near the end of the Bimini Road. But I have to warn you that it's dangerous and full of monsters trained to keep our territory safe. You'll need to be careful." "We will," Sean said, meeting her eyes. There was some kind of unspoken agreement that passed between them in that moment, and I felt like I should look away. I turned back to the stone tablet, still pulsing with energy, faster now along with my own racing heart. This was it. It almost seemed too easy. "Ready?" I asked. "Whenever you are." I lifted the dagger again and felt the warrior awakening inside me. My muscles ached as though they were stirring after a long nap, stretching and preparing for battle. The dagger felt cool in my palm, its reflection catching my eye in the glass of the case just before I struck. And with all the power of Athena, strike it I did. The glass shattered into a million fragments, almost in slow motion. I became acutely aware of every piece as it fell, and the tablet, taking it into my hands, was like finding a lost path that led me home. "Let's go, Everly." I wrapped the piece under one arm, hugging it tightly to my side, and ran for the passageway. Together, the three of us pulled the door shut again, behind us. "You'll need to go left. The hall will take you straight to the exit. I can't go with you, but please, let me know if there is anything I can do in the future to help with the prophecy." "We will. Thank you, Anastasia, truly." I dug into my pocket and pulled out the useless skeleton key. "This is yours, by the way. I don't know what it goes to, but you can keep it." The girl smiled. "That's just the key to my diary. Now I'm glad you didn't find it. Now go. Be safe on your travels." She placed a quick kiss on Sean's cheek, and then we parted ways. Though we could barely hear the sirens through the thick stone walls, we knew the guardians were coming for us. Sean and I ran like our lives depended on it. Chapter 26. The hall wound around the palace down to a narrow set of stairs, and we knew the moment we stumbled across the exit. It shimmered before us, a wall of liquid that we couldn't see through. "Hold your breath," Sean called out, and he dove straight into the moving surface of the wall. I didn't hesitate to follow him this time. We were back in the ocean, treading water in unfamiliar territory. Sean whirled around in a circle, searching for something. "There!" He pointed to a pile of rocks on the sea floor not far from where we swam. I followed him over to see what they were. "The Bimini Road. This will lead us past Port Aeris. We'll need to swim fast, though. I can pull you along if you want." Even as he said it, I could feel the power pulsing through my limbs, stronger now than it had ever before been. "I think I'll be able to keep up." I dove forward, leaving Sean in my wake. "Holy cow!" He caught up to my side. "You're almost as fast as me. Is it the tablet?" "I don't know," I confessed. I had a hard time deciphering between the tablet's power and my own. The only thing I could be certain of was that I was a lot stronger when I had warrior mode engaged. That inner Athena could really come in handy. The tablet pulsed warm and steady under my arm, the dagger cold and hard in the waistband of my pants. I wasn't exactly prepared for battle, but I definitely felt strong enough to face the task ahead, whatever it might be. The look on Anastasia's face when she understood that I was a deliverer would be forever etched in my brain. Such hope. She needed me to set her free. I couldn't even begin to guess how quickly we were moving now. We blasted through the water like dual torpedoes, the ocean a blur, except for the broken stone trail on the bottom of the sea that guided us home. "Thank you, by the way, for looking out for me back at the palace. I hate to admit that I actually wondered if you had sold me out to your dad for a second there." "You're welcome." Sean glanced at me with a crooked grin. "I would never." He was gone. Mid-sentence. Just gone. I stopped and spun around just in time to duck under the enormous black tentacle that swung my way. "What in Atlantis is that?" Anastasia said the road was guarded by monsters, but I never guessed she meant it literally. I darted around a large piece of coral searching for Sean. From this angle, I was able to see the entire creature. It was like a shadow under the water, and it was difficult to see exactly how large it was, with its mass of undulating tentacles. But it looked about the size of a full basketball court, and wrapped up in one of those disgusting appendages was Sean, waving through the air, delivering punch after punch to the beast that held him, to no avail. Another of the tentacles came shooting at me, but I was faster. I threw myself down to the floor of the sea, grabbing at the first rock I could get my hands around. It was slightly bigger than a bowling ball, and maybe 4 times as heavy. I chucked it at the tentacle with all my might, causing the squirming appendage to pull back just enough for me to get away. Sean called out for me to go on without him, but there wasn't a chance I was going to leave him for dead with this beast. I blasted through the water, pulling out Rossel's dagger as I swam, and prepared to fight until he was free. But there were so many tentacles, so many writhing, twisting, stretching limbs of solid muscle. I couldn't keep track of them all, and I couldn't outrun them, especially as I got closer to the monster's body. I was only a few yards away from Sean when the life was squeezed out of me. My vision darkened around the edges, and something cracked in my chest. I gasped for one more lungful of oxygen before my ribs were crushed, and then everything stopped. A piece of seaweed was suspended before me, frozen in time within an unmoving ocean. My power had activated again, all on its own. I didn't understand how this kept happening, but I was definitely grateful for it, and there was no time to question it now. Dagger still in hand, I cut through the beast, sawing back and forth through the thick muscles that wrapped around me, and trying not to gag at the black blood that leaked from it. Then it was time to release Sean. I propelled myself through the water, unsure of how long I had before time started moving again. I plunged the dagger down into the tentacle that wrapped around him, cutting through its flesh and severing a small piece at the end of the long appendage, about the length of my hand. Taking hold of the small piece, I tucked it into my pocket like a trophy and continued sawing until Sean was free. The pressure was already building in my chest again. I had a minute at most to get us as far away from the beast as possible. Tucking the dagger back into my waistband and tightening my grip on the stone tablet in one arm, I wrapped the other around Sean and swam as hard and fast as I could. I didn't know how long I swam or how far we'd gone, or even the exact moment time clicked back into place as it should be. But at some point, Sean broke free from my grasp and stopped me. "Everly." His eyes were wide. "It happened again, didn't it?" I nodded. "You saved my life." I nodded again. "Are you okay?" My heart was racing and my chest ached. But yes, I realized, I was fine. Power of unknown origin pulsed through my veins. I couldn't wield it, but it was there. We'd escaped Atlantis, gotten another piece of the prophecy, and were halfway back to Porto Maris by now. "Yeah," I said with a grin. "I'm okay." I pulled the small piece of tentacle from my pocket and held it out to Sean. "I got you a souvenir." He gaped. "You've got a piece of the Kraken." "You bet I do." A laugh bubbled up from my chest, a small giggle at first, and before I knew it, Sean and I were both laughing until tears streamed from our eyes. After the morning we'd had, it was a wonder we were still alive. The laugh did us good. The swim back to Porto Maris didn't take long with my newfound speed through the water, and I shouldn't have been as surprised as I was to find Driscoll sitting on a rock on the sand as we emerged above the water's surface near the island. After all, Gayla said in her vision that he watched and waited, and he knew when I was coming. We staggered onto the land, our wet clothes dragging and weighing us down. It was too bad the magical properties of Atlantis didn't extend themselves here. I sure wouldn't have minded being instantly dry again. Driscoll met us at the water's edge, eyes glued to the glowing piece of stone under my arm. "You found it." His hands were shaky as they reached forward, but he thought better of it before trying to take the piece from me. He must have seen the look in my eyes that said I wasn't handing it over to anyone, for any purpose. Because even though I wanted Driscoll to tell me what it said, the tablet made me ache with the need to reconnect it to the other piece. Some part of my brain became innately aware of where the other piece rested, below the sand we stood upon, hidden inside the room the people here had offered for Driscoll. And I was moving before I could give it another thought. "Hide it," Driscoll shouted after me, running to catch up. "Put it under your shirt or something." We entered the hidden compound of Porto Maris, moving quickly through the restaurant and down the halls back into the sleeping quarters below. I was a woman on a mission, never stopping to give anyone a chance to ask who I was or where I was going. I vaguely heard Driscoll and Sean giving explanations behind me as I moved toward my destination. And the closer I got to the other piece of the tablet, the stronger my need was to reconnect them. I didn't have to ask where it was when we entered Driscoll's room at last. It called to me, and with a deep breath, I took the other piece into my hands and pushed the broken edges of the two together. A blinding light filled the room as a jolt of energy knocked me to the floor. Driscoll and Sean were still shielding their eyes as I got back to my feet and inspected the prophecy. The two pieces had fused themselves seamlessly together to create one perfect half of the full prophecy. Driscoll released a breath of wonder as he approached. "May I?" he asked. "Of course." Now that the pieces had been restored, the tension that had propelled me earlier finally eased. The tablet no longer glowed blue, but I could still feel its heartbeat in tandem with my own. I passed it to Driscoll, confident that it would be safe for him to hold. His bushy brows furrowed together as he took it in. "Well?" Sean stepped closer. "What does it say?" "The daughter of sea and sky, together with the one who ignites her heart, in her centennial incarnation, shall form a white braid of the powers that bind. The deliverer alone can wield—" "Can wield what?" I asked, desperate for more. "That," Driscoll said, "is yet to be determined. You must find the other two pieces of the prophecy." "I will," I said, a new ferocity sparking inside me. I knew it to be true, whether it was what I wanted or not, and no one would stop me, not Rossel or Osborne or Peter Bratton. I couldn't even be stopped by the Kraken. This was bigger than them. It was bigger than me. It was everything. I would find the prophecy, and I would unite our people. It was my destiny. This has been Fractured Lies, Daughter of Sea and Sky, Book 3, Part 2.